What's up everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Combo Damage TV. I always say that universal mechanics are a huge component of what makes a good fighting game, especially when they're defensive mechanics. Pretty sure it's in my top 3. You can make a full roster with a diverse array of characters, each with their own unique strengths and weaknesses, and still give them mechanics that they all share to level the playing field. I was never able to connect with Street Fighter V for this reason. As much as that game tried so hard for so many years to better itself, the V system to me was just terrible. Imagine giving everyone a move called a V reversal, but it's not even a reversal for every character. Street Fighter VI finally corrects this problem, but I already knew when it was first announced and they explained the mechanics that it was going to be superior to 5 for this very reason. And I'm happy to report that even in this current build, it surpasses its predecessor in every meaningful way. My impressions for this video will mainly cover gameplay, followed by some quick closing thoughts on the visuals and content. So at first, I wasn't really sure how I felt about the movement. The weight and the gravity of a fighting game is one of the first things you get a feel for. It's the very thing that determines what the neutral feels like, and the first word that came to my mind was clunky. I don't know what it was, but dashing and movement felt a tad bit unresponsive. Not because it actually is, but it's clear that there was a more locked-in positioning type of heftiness to the overall feel of the game. It's not particularly fast either. As a rushdown mix-up player in just about every fighting game, I was struggling a little bit to figure out the method to closing in and maintaining pressure. Unlike other fighting games, you can't just dash forward and attack here. You have to wait for your character to complete their dash animation before attacking. There's a mechanic for that, which I'll get to in a bit, but these were just some of my initial feelings. Now, I'm going to get a lot of flack for this, but another thing that I still find disappointing is the lack of strings. Yes, Street Fighter VI has target combos, but per character, it's usually just a few, and it's random whether or not you can cancel them into a special. This is pretty typical for Street Fighter in general, but even Gatling, which is just light, medium, hard, I still don't understand why Street Fighter hasn't adopted this yet. It felt very good in Cross Tekken, and was the only time I've seen it applied to Street Fighter outside of their 4-button crossovers. Moves that can be cancelled are still very specific, and that's always felt kind of restrictive to me. For example, Chun-Li's lightning kick can't be followed up with a super, but the EX version can. Luke has a target combo that he can only cancel into a special, and another that he can only cancel into a super. I feel like a sequel could benefit from a more up-to-date string plus ender combo system for the whole roster, but unfortunately, Street Fighter is still not about that life. With that said, freedom of expression and combos are very much a part of this game, and while the neutral feels very par for the course as far as Street Fighter games are concerned, tapping into the universal mechanics is really what starts to drastically transform the experience. You know, it's funny. The mechanic that I cared the least about turned out to be the biggest deal for me, and that mechanic is the parry drive rush. Let me explain. We already knew the drive rush was meant for extending your combos. What I didn't know was that it could be done from a parry state, and you don't have to parry an attack to do it. This is, in essence, the run mechanic of the game. This is what you use to dash in towards your opponent and cancel it into an attack. And when I say an attack, I mean anything. Just like a standard drive rush, it can be canceled into a normal, a special move, my personal favorite, a grab. Shit, you could even cancel it into a drive impact if you want. But the fact that they let you do it from a neutral state with no restrictions on your follow-up, this is when I finally became one with the game. Granted, not everyone covers the same speed or distance, but everyone can do it nonetheless. The challenge I had figuring out how to rush and mix my opponents had finally been laid to rest, and my interest was fully piqued. I was able to focus on getting used to the neutral and start enjoying the rest of what this new drive system had to offer. The drive impact is the mechanic I was most excited for, as it's essentially a focus attack that can withstand a total of 3 hits. What makes it a very good tool, however, isn't the fact that you get a free combo on counter hit. It's the fact that even on block, it creates a wall splat. Oh yeah, the corner game in Street Fighter has definitely changed. And if your back is against the wall, you've got the drive impact to worry about. But it's okay. There are countermeasures for this scenario. Sure, you could try to jump over your opponent, or you could opt for a multitude of options that nullify the drive impact, which include parries, grabs, at least 3 attacks, supers, or you could just counter with a drive impact of your own. I'm not sure if the block cancel also works in this situation, but it's another fantastic mechanic that can undo pressure. Unlike the V reversal, it's actually a reversal for the whole cast now. In my opinion, there's no mechanic in the drive system that feels too strong, and it's not because it all uses meter. It's because your opponent is also responsible for why you're losing meter. Blocking. Getting punish countered. Even getting hit with a drive impact all take from your drive meter. So unless you're not worried about getting touched at all, you have to be strategic. All it takes is for you to be half empty, for your opponent to be like, now is probably a good time to either chip or punish you into exhaustion. And once you're there, with no drive meter available to save you, not only are you in that state for a good while, but this is where your health bar starts taking real chip damage on block. This is why sprinkling parries into your gameplay is so important, because you actually gain meter by successfully landing them. I have to commend Capcom on what they've done here. I've never played another fighting game where your resource meter is affected by being attacked, whether it's on hit or on block. Just the get-in game itself may require meter at times, which to me after only a few days makes Street Fighter 6 feel more like a defensive game. The checks and balances here ensure that rushdown has to be earned, and winning matches still ultimately boils down to respecting the neutral. The characters themselves feel good as well. While the game itself isn't focused on target combos, it seems like more characters have them now, along with more unique attacks and more multi-hitting normals. Legacy characters still feel familiar but fresh, and even basic characters like Ryu no longer feel that basic, regardless of whether or not you're using drive meter. And I really like the fact that there are multiple levels to supers now. Fighting games have been getting kind of lazy here, where activating a super means seeing the same animation play out over and over again. The fact that characters have at least 3 or more means there's quite a bit of variety when activating supers. I used Luke during the majority of the beta, and no particular character felt too overpowered, especially with the drive system at my disposal. I did briefly try the modern controls, and while I am a huge supporter of simplifying controls for fighting games, I have mixed emotions about it here. Do they work well? I'd say so. Do you lose moves if you choose modern controls? According to the move lists, yes. I feel like I'll be able to speak more on this though, once the final game is released. Visually, I still feel like it's a mixed bag. When comparing the hyper-realistic art style and graphics that we've seen in Capcom's other games using the RE engine, it's no surprise that once again, a fighting game gets the short end of the stick. Supers, close-ups, and win poses all look very next-gen and rendered. But during the fighting, the characters still move and look like a standard Street Fighter game. And I don't think the problem is the graphics necessarily, but more so the animations. I get that the rhythm and the feel that's ingrained in the series needs to remain somewhat consistent for hardcore fans, but I can't help but feel like it's just a prettier game slapped onto the same jump kick, sweep, crouching jab, hit stoppy look that we've seen for decades. The art style is all over the place too. It feels like this weird, bad, wannabe urban experience with spray paint unnecessarily spewing out from everywhere and everyone. And that's fine, the game doesn't really take itself seriously. And as much as I long for what Street Fighter lore could have been, had they just adopted the badassery of the 90s anime, it has instead morphed into things like Blanca wearing overalls and taking a day job as a tour guide. Yeah, the game just feels confused about its identity and what it wants to represent. And finally, there's not much to share yet in the way of content, as neither World Tour nor Fighting Ground were available during the beta. So the only option was to go straight into Battle Hub for online matches. Battle Hub is basically the World Hub from ArcSys games, which ultimately always ends up being more tedious than simply just pulling up menus to join lobbies and matches. I support creating social spaces within fighting games, but this method tends to be more annoying than fun. Creating an avatar for this is the first thing you're forced to do before accessing the full game, and by now I'm sure you've seen all the abominations that Capcom has allowed the community to create. But if you want a less ridiculous overview of the actual creation suite, there's a link to my video on that in the description below. And there you have it, folks. The game is of course still in beta, and things will change. But for me, the first step to making this a proper sequel was to have shared mechanics that are actually viable. And I think they outdid themselves here with how it all depends on the drive meter. While I don't think the visual quality is truly next gen, which is a given since it'll be supported on last gen hardware, I think the gameplay is shaping up to be a solid offering for Street Fighter and fighting game fans alike. Whether or not modern controls and single player content can bring in new players remains to be seen. But what do you think? Is Street Fighter 6 looking like a game you might pick up? If you made it into the beta, or just have strong opinions about how you think the game is shaping up, let me know what you think in the comments. Until next time, thanks for stopping by and take care.